Hey guys, tonight we step into a world that lies so far back in time that even the oldest of myths barely whisper its memory. Imagine the year is around 7000 BC. The air along the foothills of Baluchistan smells of damp earth and wood smoke, for the rains have come and gone, leaving behind a rich black soil waiting to be turned by human hands. You are standing near a small settlement later remembered by archaeologists as Mergar, a humble cluster of mud brick homes where some of the earliest farmers of South Asia are carefully testing the strange new gamble of life tethered to land. You squint at the rising sun, a copper disk just clearing the line of distant hills. Smoke curls from hearths, men and women step out of their simple homes carrying baskets of grain, their bare feet pressing into the cool earth still slick from night dew. They are barley farmers, though they hardly know the word barley as we do. To them these golden stalks are lifelines, fragile and precious. A wrong season, a spoiled harvest, and the whole village could vanish. Yet they persist, guiding seeds into furrows, scratched with wooden plows and hands calloused from decades of coaxing food from the soil. And you, dropped into this scene like some bewildered time traveler, would probably not last a week. The water is risky, the food bland, the nights full of jackals, leopards, and snakes. But lean closer, because this fragile place, this little patch of huts by the Bolan Pass, will ignite a chain of innovations that ripple out for thousands of years, eventually feeding into the story of the Indus Valley civilization, one of humanity's most astonishing experiments in urban life. The smell of baked earth lingers as women kneel to grind grain on heavy stones, their rhythmic motions sending up small puffs of flour. Children chase half-domesticated goats between the huts, their laughter carrying on the wind. Men bend over animal bones, carving awls and needles to stitch together hides. A burial mound nearby reveals the seriousness of their venture. The dead are carefully laid to rest with ornaments of shell and lapis, as if life's value is measured not only in food, but in the memories carried into whatever comes after. Already, belief and survival walk hand in hand here. Mergar is not alone. Across the fertile floodplains and semi-arid valleys of what will become Pakistan and northwest India, dozens of little hamlets sprout up like hesitant seedlings. People still hunt wild cattle and gather fruits, but more and more they tether themselves to wheat and barley, to sheep and goats, to homes that do not wander. Fires are no longer only for warding off predators at night, they are for roasting grain, hardening pottery, and baking bricks. The flickering hearth becomes the anchor of the household, and the household the anchor of society. You trudge through the settlement, noting the architecture. Modest, rectangular houses built of sun-dried mud brick, plastered smooth, with floors sometimes hardened by lime. They are simple yet durable, cool in the summer heat and retaining warmth in the winter chill. Each one opens to small courtyards, where families gather, gossip and plan their daily tasks. Already, life is becoming communal, structured around patterns of sowing, harvesting, and storage. Clay bins rise in corners, filled with surplus grain, little vaults of security against lean times. If you crouch beside one of the potters, you'd see fingers shaping clay into bowls and jars, then hardening them in open-air kilns. These aren't yet masterpieces, but they're functional, patterned with faint decorations scratched into the surface. Pottery means permanence. Food can be stored, water carried, goods traded. It's a sign that humanity has stepped across a threshold from mere survival towards something that feels almost like civilization. The domestication of animals is equally transformative. You watch as men drive a small herd of zebu cattle toward a watering hole, their distinctive humped backs silhouetted against the afternoon light. These creatures are wealth and muscle, able to pull simple plows and provide milk. Goats and sheep are herded into pens, bleating noisily, their wool already beginning its long history of usefulness. With animals tethered, life's risks soften though never disappear. Yet this stability comes with new dangers. Crops can fail, disease can spread quickly when humans and animals live so closely. You can almost hear the cough of a child echoing from inside a house, the first hints of epidemics that agricultural life brings. Hunter-gatherers may have had dangerous hunts, but they seldom died in heaps from smallpox or dysentery. Settled life offers food security, but also fragility. What holds these early people together is not just food, but ritual. At Mergar, burials reveal beads of turquoise, shells carried from faraway coasts, and figurines of women with exaggerated hips and breasts. Symbols perhaps of fertility and life, these little clay icons hint at an emerging worldview, the cycles of birth and death, the fertility of soil, the mysteries of reproduction. Already humans are turning their anxieties into ritual objects, hoping that the unseen world will bless their risky agricultural experiment. The rivers are everything, from the Bolan Pass. Trade routes thread out toward the Indus plains, where larger settlements will later grow. The Indus itself is still wild, unpredictable, swelling with monsoon rains and shrinking in dry spells. Villagers live with its moods. You hear the roar of floodwaters tearing through fields, wiping away months of labor in a single night. Then, in quieter times, you see families spreading nets into smaller tributaries, hauling in fish that glitter silver in the sun. Life here is always a gamble with water. Too much and you drown, too little and you starve. But humans adapt. They dig small channels to guide water to their fields. They learn the rhythm of monsoon winds, planting when the rains approach, harvesting when the skies clear. In time, these experiments will evolve into the sophisticated irrigation networks that sustain Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. For now they are humble scratches in the earth, but they mark the beginning of a dialogue with rivers that will define an entire civilization. Your day in this early settlement continues. In the heat of the afternoon, families retreat indoors, walls cool against their skin, beads clink as women string ornaments from carnelian, turquoise and shell, some gathered locally, others obtained through exchange with wandering groups. Trade is already alive. Imagine a bead from the Arabian Sea arriving here, hundreds of miles inland, carried on the back of a trader with calloused feet. This is not isolation. Even in these early days, human communities reach outward, tying themselves into webs of exchange that stretch across mountains and deserts. The evening comes, and fires crackle again. You sit with the villagers, as they share a meal of flatbread baked from barley, perhaps lentils or dates added when available. Children nod off beside their mothers, dogs curl near the flames, and men tell stories of hunts and ancestors. Shadows dance on mud walls, and in those flickering forms you glimpse the beginnings of culture, of identity, of a shared sense of belonging to a place. Day by day, year by year, this fragile routine solidifies. By 500 BCE, Mehrgarh is thriving, expanding across several mounds, with thousands of inhabitants. Craft specialization deepens. Some families focus on pottery, others on bead making, still others on herding. Social distinctions appear in burials, some bodies adorned with jewelry, others not. Inequality is taking root, subtle but growing, and in this too you see the seed of what will later blossom in the grand cities of the Indus. What's striking is the continuity. The people of Mehrgarh and other early sites passed down practices farming wheat and barley, domesticating animals, shaping beads that will persist for millennia. When Harappan cities rise 2,000 years later, they will still be stringing carnelian beads, still herding zebu cattle, still growing wheat and barley. The roots run deep, and they begin here. But it's not just technology that evolves. Climate plays a role. Around 5000 BCE, monsoon patterns shift, bringing more reliable rains to the Indus plains. Villages spread out from the hills into the valleys, hugging rivers and streams. Populations grow, fields expand, and with expansion comes complexity, coordinating, irrigation, managing surpluses, protecting herds. These require cooperation, perhaps even the first forms of governance. Not kings or emperors, not yet, but councils of elders, respected families, or ritual leaders who guide decisions. You walk now through these plains, seeing the mosaic of human adaptation. In some places, small farming hamlets hug the land. In others, larger proto-villages sprawl, linked by paths trodden by herders and traders. Across the horizon, smoke from dozens of hearths curls skyward, each one a signal that humanity's great gamble sedentary life is holding. And though the people of 6000 or 5000 BCE could never imagine it, their decisions are laying the groundwork for something monumental. The mud huts of Mehrgarh will one day echo in the gridded streets of Harappa. The clay beads, strung by village women, will one day glimmer in the markets of Mohenjo-Daro. The irrigation ditches, scratched into soil, will one day feed tens of thousands in carefully engineered reservoirs. The whispers of ritual in tiny shrines will one day resound in the seals and symbols of a civilization still undeciphered. All of it begins here, in the smoke, sweat and soil of these earliest farmers, whose quiet labor across centuries built the platform for one of the world's first great urban civilizations. You wake the next morning not in a mud brick hut, but on the edge of something vast. The Indus River sprawls before you like a restless serpent, its waters swollen by melting snow from the Himalayas far to the north. The sound is thunderous, constant, a living pulse that both nourishes and threatens. The geography of this place is no mere backdrop, it is the stage, the engine, the unpredictable God that shapes every rhythm of life for the people who will become the Indus Valley civilization. Close your eyes and feel the humidity rise from the water. The smell is rich and sharp, a mix of wet earth, rotting reeds, and silt stirred up by the current. Birds wheel overhead, flamingos, ibises, cranes settling on sandbars where fish shimmer below the surface. On either bank, green belts of vegetation stretch out like ribbons, date palms, tamarisk shrubs, and grasses that sway with the breeze. Beyond that lush margin, the world changes abruptly. To the east lies the dry sweep of the Thar Desert, its sands encroaching each year like an advancing army. To the west rise the stark cliffs and valleys of Balochistan, their stony ridges cutting into the sky, and far to the north, beyond sight but never beyond influence, tower the Himalayas, feeding these rivers with snowmelt and glacial streams. This geography is destiny. Without it, no great civilization would have bloomed here. The Indus Valley people did not pick this land at random, they were born of it, molded by its extremes. The river is their pantry, their highway, their garbage chute, and occasionally their execution. Step closer and you'll see how monsoons dominate the cycle. Each summer, heavy rains sweep in from the Indian Ocean, drumming against mud walls and flooding the plains. Crops sprout in this watery chaos, fields transformed into seas of green. Then, as the rains withdraw, rivers shrink into narrower channels, leaving behind fertile silt where wheat and barley thrive. It is a pendulum of feast and fear. One season of too much rain and entire villages drown. One season of too little, and famine stalks the land. You probably wouldn't survive even a single monsoon here without losing either your food, your house or your sanity. The rivers themselves are many. The Indus is the giant, but its siblings matter too. The Ravi, Beas, Chenab, Sete, and Jhelum, all Himalayan-born, all converging like tributaries of fate. Then there's the mysterious Saraswati, or Gaga Hakra, now mostly dry but once roaring across the plains, feeding settlements with water and fertile soils. The people of the Indus civilization learned early how to live with these waters, how to exploit them, and how to fear them. Walk further downstream, and the geography unfolds like a story in 3 acts. In the upper Indus, steep valleys cut through the mountains, and communities cluster in pockets where terraces can be carved. In the middle Indus, broad floodplains open up, perfect for farming and settlement, though prone to catastrophic flooding. In the lower Indus, the river fans out into a great delta, where fish, reeds and salt mingle in an endless labyrinth of channels. Each region will host its own expressions of Indus life, from hilltop villages, to sprawling cities, to delta outposts where boats trade goods with lands across the Arabian Sea. And don't think of this land as isolated. To the west lies the Iranian plateau, offering routes into Mesopotamia. To the east, the Gangetic plain stretches toward forests and rivers that will one day birth other civilizations. To the north, passes through the Hindu Kush open onto Central Asia. Geography makes the Indus not a cul-de-sac, but a crossroads. The beads of carnelian you saw in section 1. Many will eventually travel to Mesopotamia, the cotton woven here, some of the first in the world, and it will move along trade routes into lands that have never felt its soft threads. Geography provides both the materials and the connections. Let's pause for a moment. You're standing knee-deep in the mud of an Indus floodplain, trying not to get stuck. Behind you, a farmer shouts as he drives cattle across a field, their hooves sinking into the wet soil. Ahead, a fisherman casts his net, hoping for carp or catfish. To your left, children are gathering reeds to weave into mats. To your right, a potter is scraping clay from the riverbank. This geography doesn't just shape the environment, it shapes identity. Life is a conversation between land and people, and the Indus Valley's people are excellent listeners. But geography is never static. Around 3000 BCE, climate shifts begin to reconfigure the landscape. Evidence shows that monsoon rains gradually weaken, rivers like the Saraswati dry up, and some regions become less hospitable. Settlements shift in response, hugging rivers more tightly, clustering near reliable water. The genius of the Indus Valley people lies not in resisting these changes but in adapting to them. They engineer wells, reservoirs and drainage. They move when they must. Geography tests them, and they learn. And what a geography it is! The mountains provide stone for tools, copper for ornaments, and timber for building. The plains provide endless space for fields of wheat, barley and cotton. The rivers provide fish, transport and fertile soil. Even the deserts, harsh as they are, become highways for traders carrying beads, metals and ideas. Every direction offers something, and every direction carries danger. At night, when the fires burn low, you hear the environment differently. Jackals cry across the desert edge, hyenas laugh in the dark, and leopards prowl near the villages. In the distance, thunder rolls, announcing another storm. The geography never sleeps. It is always pressing, always shaping, always demanding that humans bend to its moods. And bend they do. By 2600 BCE, when the great Indus cities rise, this geography will have been tamed at least partially. Streets will be laid out in grids to manage floods. Wells will dot the urban landscape to guarantee water. Granaries will be built to store harvests against bad seasons. But here in the earlier centuries it is raw, untamed, unpredictable. Geography is not yet a servant, it is a master. So remember this landscape, the rivers, the monsoons, the deserts, the mountains, every artifact, every ruin, every shard of pottery that will later emerge owes its existence to these conditions. Civilization does not appear in a vacuum. It grows like a plant, rooted in soil, watered by rivers, shaped by storms, and the Indus Valley civilization, perhaps more than any other, is inseparable from its geography. You're walking now not through the scattered huts of Mehrgarh or the muddy courtyards of early villages, but into something shockingly bigger. The year is around 2600 BCE, and the world has shifted. All around you, the scattered farming settlements of the Indus Valley have grown, swelled and finally fused into true cities. For the first time, humanity here is experimenting with scale, large populations, ordered streets, communal buildings, and systems so advanced that even millennia later archaeologists will shake their heads and mutter, how did they pull this off? Picture yourself on the outskirts of Harappa, one of the first of these great urban centers. As you approach, the sound of life swells, the creak of carts pulled by humped zebu cattle, the chatter of traders calling out their wares, the clatter of potters, bead makers, and smiths plying their trades. Dust hangs in the air, kicked up by thousands of feet. The smell of baked brick mixes with the scent of grain, spices, and smoke. This is no village, this is a city, and you, poor time traveler, will probably get lost in it within minutes. The scale is breathtaking. Harappa covers more than 150 hectares, its neighborhoods laid out with eerie precision. Streets intersect at right angles, creating a grid that feels modern, almost unsettlingly so. Houses are built of baked brick, standardized in size, and aligned neatly along the lanes. You pass wells sunk deep into the earth, one for nearly every household, ensuring that no resident is far from clean water. Drainage channels run along the sides of the streets, covered with slabs of brick, carrying wastewater away. You probably can't find a city in 19th century Europe with sanitation this good, yet here it is, in the Bronze Age. The organization boggles the mind. How did they achieve this? There's no evidence of kings or palaces, no monuments to single rulers, no giant statues demanding obedience. Instead, the city seems guided by collective planning, as if thousands agreed to a common vision of order and hygiene. It's not chaos, it's cooperation, baked into brick and stone. Move deeper into the city. You pass granaries, vast brick platforms where officials or elders oversee the storage of surplus grain. The air smells faintly of wheat and barley, and you imagine rodents forever scheming to break in, but the structures are careful, elevated, ventilated, engineered to protect the harvest that sustains thousands. Here lies the beating heart of the city. Food security on a scale unimaginable to the small villages of earlier centuries. To your right, you see craft districts. Workshops hum with activity, carnelian beads being polished to a glossy shine, copper tools hammered into shape, pottery spun and fired in kilns. The specialization is striking. Entire neighborhoods dedicated to production, their goods destined for trade across the subcontinent and beyond. If you hold a carnelian bead from Mesopotamia, there's a good chance it began its life right here in the dust and sweat of an Indus craftsman's shop. Children dart through the lanes, goats and dogs weaving around them. Women carry jars of water balanced on their heads, their bangles clinking softly. Men shout over ox carts piled with firewood. It feels alive, bustling, overwhelming. You'd probably crave earplugs, but also marvel at the sheer hum of human activity. And then you hear it, the sound of construction. Farther down the street, new houses rise. Men stack bricks with practiced precision, sealing them with mud mortar. What's remarkable is not the building itself, but the uniformity. bricks here are not random sizes, they are standardized typically in the ratio of 1:4. Whether you're in Harappa or Mohenjo-Daro, the same system is used, as if an invisible committee set the rules and everyone followed them. Standardization is not just about efficiency, it's about identity, about belonging to a culture that values order over chaos. Travel now southward in your imagination to Mohenjo-Daro, another jewel of the Indus. This city, sprawling across the floodplains, is even more impressive. Climb one of its raised platforms and look out. Streets stretch in straight lines, houses cluster in blocks, wells dot the horizon, and there, near the center, looms the Great Bath, a massive, brick-lined pool with steps leading down into its depths. You dip your hand into the water, cool against the heat, and wonder, was it for ritual purification, civic pride, or something we can't even guess? Whatever its use, it's monumental, a symbol of the city's capacity to build, not just for survival but for meaning. At night the city doesn't sleep so much as hymn. Fires glow in courtyards, cooking flatbreads and lentil stews. The smell of roasted grain and boiling milk fills the air. Families gather to eat, gossip, and tell stories. Somewhere in the distance a trader counts his profits from the day. Somewhere else a child falls asleep clutching a clay toy cart, wheels still spinning from play. The city is alive, even under the stars. But it's not just Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. Across the Indus plains, dozens of smaller cities and towns rise. Lothal, near the coast, with its dockyards, Kalibangan, with its fire altars, Dholavira, on the arid Rann of Kutch, with its massive reservoirs, each contributes something unique to the civilization's mosaic, yet all share the same urban DNA: grids, bricks, drains, wells, order. This is not a single city-state, but a civilization of cities, connected by trade, shared culture, and mutual vision. You pause to consider the sheer population. Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro may have housed 30,000 to 50,000 people each. Across the whole civilization, perhaps 1 million or more lived in this urban world. For the ancient Bronze Age, that is staggering. It rivals Mesopotamia, stands shoulder to shoulder with Egypt, and in many ways surpasses them in organization and cleanliness. And yet what makes the Indus cities uncanny is their silence. No ziggurats, no pyramids, no colossal statues proclaiming rulers' glory. Instead, anonymity reigns. Streets and drains speak louder than kings. The people here built their civilization not around monuments to gods or men, but around practicalities: water, sanitation, storage, trade. The absence of ego in their architecture is almost eerie. You look for a face, a name, a king, but find only bricks, all alike. Still, the achievements are monumental. The rise of these cities marks a turning point in human history. Here, scattered farming villages have coalesced into dense urban networks, sustained by surplus agriculture, animated by craft specialization, and connected by trade routes stretching from the Iranian plateau to the Arabian Sea. In less than 1,000 years, the Indus people have leapt from mud huts to planned cities. And you wandering their streets, marveling at their drains, dodging ox carts, cannot help but feel both admiration and bewilderment. This is civilization without kings, order without thrones, magnificence without monuments. This is the rise of urban centers in the Indus Valley. You stand now at the heart of an Indus city, and the very ground beneath your feet tells you something extraordinary. This was not a settlement thrown together by chance, but a place meticulously designed. It is the Bronze Age, yet the streets you tread could almost trick you into believing some modern planner has just drawn them up. Everything is geometric, deliberate, efficient. In the Indus Valley, town planning is not an afterthought, it is the foundation of urban life. Look down, the streets are straight, intersecting at right angles, forming grids that extend as far as your eye can follow. They are not narrow footpaths choked with random huts, but broad avenues wide enough for ox carts to pass each other. Some streets stretch for hundreds of meters, running north-south, east-west, as if aligned with the stars or the prevailing winds. You try to imagine the planning meetings that led to this. Groups of elders, craftsmen, or surveyors mapping out the land with ropes and measuring rods, arguing over where to place the next block. Yet the result is harmony, order, rhythm. Now crouch and run your hand over the bricks. Each one is nearly identical, the standard ratio of 1:4, whether small or large, whether baked or sun-dried. This is not coincidence, it is system. Across hundreds of kilometers from Harappa in the north to Dholavira in the south, the same proportions appear, as if an entire civilization agreed on one unifying measure. Think about that. While other cultures struggled with irregular stones or timber, the Indus people mass-produced perfection. Their cities are Lego sets on a monumental scale, designed for easy replacement, expansion and resilience. Step into a neighborhood, the houses cluster along both main streets and smaller lanes. Most are 2 stories high, with flat roofs and inner courtyards. Mud plaster smooths the walls, and niches hold lamps or jars. Many houses connect directly to the street drains, their wastewater flowing neatly away. Almost every home has its own well, so many wells in fact, that Mohenjo-Daro alone boasted over 700. Clean water is not a luxury here, it is a standard feature, accessible to rich and poor alike. Imagine the relief: no long treks for water, no constant anxiety about thirst. The city is designed for dignity. The drainage system is perhaps the most impressive. Along the streets run covered drains, built of brick and sealed with stone slabs. Wastewater from homes flows into these channels, then out of the city. Access points are built in for cleaning, ensuring the system doesn't clog. You realize with a half smile that 19th century London could have learned a thing or two from Bronze Age Mohenjo-Daro. Here in 2600 BCE, sanitation is already woven into urban design, protecting citizens from the diseases that haunt other ancient cities. In the heart of the city rise public buildings. The Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro is one of the most iconic, a rectangular pool lined with baked brick, sealed with bitumen, accessed by stairways on both sides. Around it, small rooms suggest changing areas. Was this a place for ritual purification, civic ceremony, or elite leisure? Whatever its purpose, it speaks of collective effort. No single family could build such a structure. It required planners, engineers, laborers, a society working together for shared spaces. Not far from the Great Bath stand vast granaries. At Harappa, they sit on raised platforms, ventilated by air ducts, divided into storage bays. Grain is life, and its storage here is systematic, almost industrial. You picture carts rolling in from the countryside, sacks of wheat and barley unloaded, measured with standardized weights, and stored for redistribution. The city breathes through these granaries, feeding itself like a living organism. Some cities innovate even further. At Dawavira, on the Rann of Kutch, planners faced an arid climate and unreliable rainfall. Their answer: massive reservoirs, cut from bedrock, lined with stone, linked by channels that captured seasonal rains. Standing at the edge of one, you marvel at the foresight. In a desert where water means survival, they engineered entire landscapes to trap and hold it. Dawavira is less a city, and more a hydraulic masterpiece. Architecture here is practical, but never crude. Houses show careful thought, rooms arranged around courtyards, staircases leading to upper floors, niches for lamps, drains carrying waste away. Privacy and functionality intertwine. Some larger homes may hint at wealthier families, more rooms, finer bricks, larger courtyards, but the overall impression is of relative equality. Unlike Egypt's palaces or Mesopotamia's ziggurats, Indus cities whisper communal order rather than scream individual power. Now climb one of the citadels, those raised mounds that dominate many Indus sites. From the top, the view stretches wide, streets below, houses packed tight, workshops buzzing, children running. The citadel holds public structures, granaries, baths, assembly halls. But unlike Mesopotamian temple complexes, these citadels are not primarily about gods. They are about function, order, governance without spectacle. The architecture speaks volumes. Here is a society that channels its energy into practical collective needs, rather than pyramids of vanity. At the edges of the cities, industrial zones hum with life. Brick kilns roar with heat. Workshops for beads, pottery, or metallurgy cluster together. Smoke and noise pushed away from residential streets. Even zoning is evident. Imagine that. Zoning laws in 2600 BCE. The Indus people separate the clean from the dirty, the domestic from the industrial. It is urbanism far ahead of its time. As night falls, climb onto a rooftop. The grid of streets stretches below, lit by the flicker of oil lamps. Somewhere, a drain gurgles faintly. The city hums quietly, like a vast machine at rest. The planning is not just in bricks and drains, but in rhythms of life. When to fetch water, when to trade, where to dispose of waste, how to gather grain. Every detail of architecture and layout nudges the people into cooperation. You realize that you are not just in a city, you are inside a blueprint of civilization itself. It is easy to forget how fragile all of this is. A single flood could sweep away houses, an earthquake could crack walls and drains, yet the uniformity of design allows rebuilding. Standardized bricks mean quick replacement, grids allow expansion without chaos, planning provides resilience. This is architecture as survival strategy. And what of beauty? While much is utilitarian, artistry peeks through. Painted pottery decorates homes, beads gleam in courtyards, clay figurines smile faintly from niches. Architecture does not dominate with grandeur, but supports life with quiet elegance. The beauty here is not in towering temples, but in the daily dignity of clean water, orderly streets and homes built to last. You let your hand trail along the smooth plaster of a wall still faintly cool in the evening air, and you realize this is why the Indus Valley civilization stands apart. In a world where most ancient cities are remembered for kings, gods or conquest, Indus is remembered for drains, bricks and planning. Their architecture was not about monuments, it was about people, about how to live together, cleanly, efficiently, sustainably. That in its quiet way is far more radical than any pyramid. You wake before dawn in the Indus Valley, and the first thing you notice is the sound, not the chatter of crowded streets this time, but the lowing of cattle, the creak of wooden wheels, the rhythmic thud of wooden plows pressing into damp soil. The city breathes, but its heartbeat is agriculture. Without the food pouring in from farms, the brick walls, wells, drains and markets of Harappa or Mohenjo-Daro would crumble into silence. Tonight we walk into the fields, where the real work of sustaining this civilization happens. The horizon is streaked with gold and crimson as the sun rises over the floodplain. You step barefoot into the fields, the earth cool and slick beneath your toes. Men guide oxen through furrows, wooden plows carving lines into the black soil enriched by last season's floods. Women scatter seed from baskets slung over their shoulders, wheat, barley, lentils. You hear the grain hitting the earth in steady rhythms, like a song of hope and gamble. Farming in the Indus Valley is always a conversation with nature. Too much rain and the seeds drown, too little and they shrivel, yet these farmers are skilled listeners, tuned to monsoon winds and river moods. The crops are astonishingly diverse for the Bronze Age. Wheat and barley dominate, staples ground into flour for bread and porridge. Lentils, peas, chickpeas, and sesame seeds add protein and oil to the diet. Cotton, perhaps the first ever domesticated here, is spun into thread and woven into light garments perfectly suited to the hot summers. Rice begins to appear in the later phases, evidence of adaptation to wetter eastern zones. Standing here, you see rows of green stalks, swaying in the breeze, the beginnings of culinary traditions that will echo through South Asia for millennia. The tools are simple but effective. Wooden plows pulled by oxen scratch the surface, not deep enough to exhaust the soil but sufficient to turn it for sowing. Sickles of copper or stone cut the stalks at harvest. Grinding stones in every household turn grain into flour. It's hard labor, every step of the way. Bend, scatter, cut, grind, bake, repeat. You rub your shoulders just watching them, already sore at the thought of endless days in the fields. And yet agriculture here is not only about toil, it is about organization. Fields are laid out systematically, often near water sources. Canals and channels guide river water into furrows, especially in drier regions. At Dhaulavira, the reservoirs store rainfall to irrigate crops. Farmers know the rhythm of the monsoon, when to sow, when to harvest, when to let fields rest. You almost envy their attunement to cycles of earth and sky, even as you dread the risks. Step into a village granary after the harvest. The smell is sharp and earthy, grain piled high in bins, rats kept at bay by raised floors and guards. Women measure portions with standardized weights. Small cubical stones or chert discs, identical from city to city. The surplus here doesn't just feed the household, it feeds the city. Grain flows along cart tracks into Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, where it is stored in massive public granaries. From there it supports craftsmen, traders, and administrators who no longer farm. Agriculture doesn't just feed mouths, it feeds specialization, culture, civilization itself. The animals are just as essential. Zebu cattle, with their distinctive humps, plod patiently through fields, pulling plows and carts. Goats and sheep provide milk, wool and meat. Water buffalo wallow in flooded paddies, lending muscle to the wettest regions. Chickens, likely first domesticated here, cluck and scratch in courtyards, providing eggs. You realize that the barnyard you know today, cows, goats, sheep, chickens, has roots here in these floodplains, thousands of years ago. Agriculture is also about diet. A typical meal in the Indus Valley might be flat bread made from barley flour, lentil stew simmered with onions or garlic, sesame oil drizzled on top, and perhaps dates or melons for sweetness. Milk and yogurt appear often, spiced with herbs. Fish from the rivers, meat from goats or chickens, and wild game supplement the diet when available. It is not a feast, but it is steady, sustaining. You bite into a piece of flat bread, slightly charred at the edges, and it tastes like continuity itself. Of course, agriculture is risky. One bad monsoon and the fields fail. One flood and entire crops wash away. You hear murmurs of famine in some years when granaries run low and families thin with hunger. Disease spreads easily when malnourished bodies weaken. The gamble of agriculture never ends, and yet the Indus people persevere. They build storage, diversify crops, and spread settlements across regions to buffer against local disasters. Resilience is written into their agricultural strategy. You wander further into the countryside and notice orchards and gardens. Date palms rise tall, their fruit sweet and sticky. Melons sprawl across sandy plots. Mustard plants bloom yellow, their seeds used for oil and spice. The farmers experiment constantly, adding variety to their fields. They are not passive recipients of nature's gifts. They are active innovators, shaping their environment with careful labor. Trade emerges from agriculture. Surpluses allow goods to move. Grain exchanged for metals, beads or timber. Cotton woven into cloth travels to distant lands. Sesame oil becomes a luxury export, jars of it reaching Mesopotamia. Agriculture here is not only subsistence, it is economy, wealth, power. As evening falls, you sit beside a field, the sky streaked pink and orange. Farmers gather their tools, oxen plod home, and smoke rises from village hearths. The cycle is endless. Sow, tend, harvest, store, yet in that cycle lies stability, culture, civilization. Without these farmers, sweating and straining under the sun, there would be no Harappa, no Mohenjo-Daro, no Indus Valley civilization. The cities shine, but the fields sustain. You look at your hands, streaked with dust from touching the soil, and realize something humbling. This dirt is history. Every loaf of bread, every bead, every drain, every seal, they all begin here in the earth, under the monsoon sky where ordinary men and women gamble their lives each season to coax food from the land. Agriculture is not just their livelihood, it is their lifeline, their identity, their legacy. And tonight as you drift towards sleep, you can still hear the sound, the lowing of cattle, the hiss of grain pouring into jars, the rustle of stalks in the wind. The quiet music of a civilization being fed. The city wakes differently today. You don't hear cattle in the fields, or the shuffle of farmers scattering seed. Instead, you hear the clang of hammers on copper, the hiss of furnaces, the scrape of chert blades being knapped, the quiet tick-tick-tick of beads being drilled. If agriculture is the heartbeat of the Indus Valley, then crafts and technology are its hands, skilled, clever, endlessly busy, transforming raw earth into objects of use and beauty. Step into the craftsman's quarter of Mohenjo-Daro. Narrow lanes twist between small workshops, their walls blackened by smoke from kilns. The air smells of fired clay, hot metal, and burnt shell. Everywhere you look, people are working with precision. One man spins a lump of clay on a wheel, hands steady as he shapes it into a bowl. Another tends to a kiln, sweat dripping from his brow as flames lick the edges of the pottery inside. Children crouch in corners, stringing carnelian beads onto cords. Women polish bangles of shell or faience until they gleam in the sunlight. Pottery is everywhere. Rows of jars, bowls, and goblets line the streets, decorated with geometric designs in black and red. Some feature stylized animals, bulls with curved horns, fish leaping in arcs, birds poised in flight. The forms are practical, storage jars for grain, water pitchers, cooking pots, but also elegant. Many are mass-produced, evidence of skilled potters supplying not just households but entire markets. Others are finer, destined for wealthier homes or for trade. You pick up a small goblet and trace its smooth curve, realizing it was shaped by hands that knew clay intimately. Every lump and crack, every weakness and possibility. Move further and you'll find the bead makers. If the Indus had a signature craft, this is it. Carnelian, a deep red-orange stone, is their specialty. Craftsmen heat it to bring out a richer hue, then cut and polish it into tiny cylinders or spheres. Drilling holes through these beads is a feat of patience. done with stone drills tipped with copper or diamond dust. The result is perfection, beads so uniform that archaeologists today still marvel at their precision. These beads travel far, carried by traders to Mesopotamia, where Sumerians and Akkadians coveted them as luxury items. In your hand you're holding not just jewelry but global commerce, 4,000 years before globalization becomes a buzzword. Across the lane, metal workers hammer sheets of copper into tools, axes, knives, chisels. Bronze, an alloy of copper and tin, appears too, though tin is scarce in the Indus and must be imported. The smith's skill lies not just in shaping but in recycling. Broken tools are melted down and reforged, nothing wasted. Gold and silver also shimmer in small ornaments, delicate filigree, bangles, earrings. The craftsmanship is sophisticated, far beyond simple utility. These are artisans who understand both beauty and function. Walk into a different workshop, and the smell changes, sharper, saltier. Here, shell workers carve bangles and ornaments from conch shells imported from the Arabian Sea. The white bands gleam against brown skin, worn by women across the civilization. Each bangle is polished smooth, its edges symmetrical, even in lands hundreds of kilometers from the sea. Indus women wear the ocean on their wrists, thanks to these craftsmen. Nearby, faience makers experiment with an early form of synthetic material. They crush quartz, glaze it with copper compounds, and fire it until it shines a brilliant blue-green. The resulting beads and figurines sparkle like jewels, imitating the appearance of turquoise or lapis at a fraction of the cost. Faience is the Bronze Age's clever hack, turning humble sand into glittering treasure. Everywhere you look, technology hums. The potter's wheel spins smoothly, fast enough for mass production. Stone drills whir, tipped with copper and sand, cutting holes with shocking accuracy. Balanced scales and standardized weights. Tiny cubical stones ensure fairness in trade. These weights are so consistent across the civilization that you could use one from Harappa and another from Lothiel, and get the same result. Standardization again. The Indus people loved order not just in bricks, but in measure. Step outside the workshop district and you see brick kilns smoking at the edge of the city. Workers stack raw bricks into neat piles, then fire them in huge ovens. The result, baked bricks hard as stone, resistant to floods and weather. These bricks build houses, wells, drains, granaries, everything. Without them, the civilization's urban dreams would collapse into mud. With them, cities endure for centuries. But not all crafts are for daily use. Some belong to ritual or status. Clay figurines, women with wide hips, animals with exaggerated horns, tiny carts with rolling wheels, fill homes and shrines. Some may be toys, others offerings, others symbols of fertility or protection. You hold a bull figurine, its hump and horns exaggerated, and wonder, was this a child's toy or a sacred icon? The line between play and prayer blurs in the crafts of the Indus. Don't overlook textiles. Though cloth rarely survives, spindle whorls and impressions tell their story. Cotton is spun into thread and woven into light garments, perhaps dyed with indigo or madder. Imagine walking through a market where men wear wrapped cotton cloths and women wear draped skirts. Colors bright in the sun, bangles clink, beads gleam, fabrics ripple. This is a civilization of texture, pattern, and color. Step now into the dockyard of Lothal, a coastal city. Here, technology meets geography. Engineers have dug a massive basin lined with brick, fed by channels from the Sabarmati River. Boats dock here, unloading goods from faraway lands. You see ivory, shells, semi-precious stones. In return, jars of sesame oil, cotton cloth, and carnelian beads are loaded onto ships bound for Mesopotamia. The dockyard is not only a feat of engineering, but a symbol of ambition. The Indus people were not content with farming alone. They were part of a wider world. It's easy to romanticize, but remember the risks. Kilns explode, injuring potters. Metal workers breathe smoke daily, their lungs darkened by years of labor. Bead makers go blind from staring at tiny holes. Crafts require patience, skill, sacrifice, and yet the output is breathtaking. Objects so precise and beautiful that they still astonish us thousands of years later. By nightfall, the workshop's quiet. Craftsmen wash soot from their hands. Bead makers gather their tools. Potters stack their wares. Children play with clay carts. Mothers slip on shell bangles. Traders count beads by lamplight. The city rests, but its crafts endure. Tomorrow, more beads will be drilled, more pots fired, more bricks stacked. This endless rhythm of labor sustains the civilization, one polished carnelian bead at a time. And as you drift to sleep, the sound echoes in your head, the spin of the potter's wheel, the hiss of fire, the tap of a chisel, crafts and technologies, the quiet genius of a people who built not monuments to themselves but a living fabric of daily objects, practical and beautiful, durable enough to outlast their cities. The city is still waking, and today its pulse doesn't come from the fields or the workshops but from the markets. You hear it before you see it, the hum of bargaining voices, the creak of carts, the bray of donkeys, the bleating of goats, and the steady clang of bronze weights striking against stone as merchants measure out grain, beads, or cotton. Trade is the lifeblood that connects one end of the Indus civilization to the other, and even beyond. Step into the bazaar of Harappa, and the air is thick with smells, spices and sesame oil, sweat and wood smoke, the faint tang of fish hauled in from the river. You see stalls lined with pottery, each vessel painted with geometric designs, trays of beads, polished to a glossy shine, piles of cotton cloth folded neatly, jars of honey, dates and lentils stacked like treasures. Merchants shout prices, their voices rough from years of haggling. Women browse bangles, children tug at their skirts, eyes wide at the toy carts and figurines. What makes this market hum is standardization. Every deal is measured with uniform weights. Small chert cubes, conical stones or discs of limestone, consistent across the entire civilization. Whether you buy barley in Mohenjo-Daro or beads in Lothal, the scale tips the same. It's trust written in stone. In a world where cheating could mean hunger, that's revolutionary. Now follow a caravan, leaving the city. Ox carts creak under loads of grain, cloth, beads and copper tools. Men walk alongside, sandals slapping dust, sticks tapping at the cattle. Their path leads westward, toward the passes of Baluchistan, and beyond that, to the Iranian plateau and Mesopotamia. The journey is brutal, days of heat, nights of biting cold, thieves lurking in narrow valleys, but the reward is rich. Across the Zagros mountains lie cities like Ur and Lagash, hungry for Indus goods. And what goods they are! The Indus exports cotton textiles, some of the earliest in the world. Imagine Mesopotamian merchants running their hands over soft, breathable fabric, marveling at its lightness compared to their heavy wool. The Indus also sends carnelian beads, glowing like embers, so prized that Sumerian queens are buried with them. Shell bangles travel inland, symbols of wealth far from the sea. Sesame oil, rich and fragrant, becomes both food and medicine abroad. Even peacocks, dazzling in their plumage, may have been sent west as exotic gifts. In return, the Indus imports what it cannot produce. Tin, essential for making bronze, comes from distant mines in Afghanistan or Iran. Silver and gold flow in, gleaming in ornaments. Lapis lazuli, the deep blue stone of legends, arrives from Badakhshan, carried across mountains and deserts. From Mesopotamia, the Indus acquires wool, dates, and luxury goods. The exchange is steady, constant, and transformative. But trade isn't only long distance. Within the Indus, goods circulate through river routes and overland paths. Boats with flat bottoms glide along the Indus and its tributaries, laden with jars, cloth, and baskets of grain. Carts rumble between villages and towns, linking countryside with city. Lothal, near the coast, thrives as a port city, its dockyard a hub where river meets sea. Standing there, you watch boats being loaded, cotton cloth stacked high, jars of sesame oil sealed tight, beads packed in reed baskets. The air smells of salt and tar. Sailors shout, their voices blending with gull cries. Tomorrow, the boats will slip out to sea, bound for Oman, Bahrain or Mesopotamia. Follow the goods farther west. Imagine standing in the markets of Ur around 2300 BCE. Amid piles of wool, dates and silver you see a basket of carnelian beads, unmistakably Indus-made. The merchant boasts of their origin, far beyond the mountains, from a land of great rivers and orderly cities. To Mesopotamians the Indus is Meleha, a distant and exotic place, rich in wonders. Clay tablets record its name, seals depict Indus ships, and merchants who likely spoke in different tongues somehow found common ground in trade. Not all exchanges are material. Along with goods come ideas and techniques. Indus weights may have influenced Mesopotamian measures. Mesopotamian cylinder seals appear in Indus cities, suggesting cultural borrowing. Even the art of sailing spreads, as Indus mariners navigate the Arabian Sea with confidence. Trade weaves cultures together, subtle threads that shift the course of history. Of course, trade is risky. Caravans face bandits, ships risk storms, merchants gamble fortunes. You overhear one trader cursing a monsoon that sank half his cargo, another complains of thieves who stole his tin near the Bolen Pass. Yet still they come, day after day, drawn by profit and need. Trade is as much about resilience as wealth. Step back into the Harappan Bazaar by evening, lamps flicker, casting golden light on jars of grain and strings of beads. Merchants count profits, children nibble dates, women admire new ornaments. The air cools, voices soften, but the hum of commerce never ceases. Trade here is not just economy, it is identity. To be Indus is to be part of a network that stretches from deserts to seas, from mountains to faraway kingdoms. And as you drift to sleep, you realize the truth. The Indus Valley civilization is not an island, it is a crossroads, its lifeblood flowing through caravans, boats and bazaars. Its beads gleam in foreign tombs, its cotton clothes foreign bodies, its sesame oil foreign lamps. The people here live not in isolation but in a world already interconnected, a Bronze Age web spun from stone, clay, cloth and courage. You wake this morning not in the workshop or the fields but in the heart of an Indus neighborhood. The sun spills across flat rooftops, voices rise from the streets below, and already you can feel it. This is a civilization that organizes life with a quiet precision. If the streets and drains are the skeleton of the city, then the people and their daily rhythms are its flesh and breath. To understand the Indus Valley, you must walk among its households, listen to its gossip, eat its bread, and watch how order is stitched into ordinary days. Start with the houses. From above, the rooftops look like a chessboard, each block aligned neatly along the grid. Most dwellings are modest, 2 stories built of baked brick, with a central courtyard that is both kitchen, playground, and social space. Privacy is built into the architecture. Rooms open inward, not toward the street, creating a sheltered life away from the bustle outside. In the mornings, women grind grain at stone querns, their arms moving in practiced rhythm, filling the air with the dusty smell of flour. Children chase each other around courtyards, dodging clay jars and goats. Men prepare tools or tend to carts before heading into the workshops or fields. Yet not all houses are equal. Some are larger, with multiple rooms, finer bricks, and more wells, evidence of social distinction. Others are small, cramped, with shared walls and little space. Archaeology suggests a hierarchy, though less extreme than in Mesopotamia or Egypt. There are wealthier families, perhaps merchants or master craftsmen, and poorer laborers, but the gap between them seems less like a canyon and more like a slope. Still, inequality whispers from the brickwork. The daily diet reflects this mix. In wealthier homes, meals might include wheat bread, lentil stew, milk, sesame oil, and even meat or fish on occasion. In humbler homes, flatbread and porridge dominate, with vegetables or dates when available. Food is prepared communally, cooked in clay ovens or over open hearths. The smell of roasting barley drifts through alleyways, mingling with the sharper scent of onions and garlic. In the evenings, families gather in their courtyards, sharing food while neighbors trade news across low walls. Step into the market street during the day, and the social order comes alive. Merchants call out their goods, women haggle for bangles, children beg for sweets or toys. Craftsmen sit cross-legged at their stalls, polishing beads or weighing grain. Everyone knows their place. The potter makes pots, the bead maker drills carnelian, the farmer brings wheat, the merchant sells, the buyer haggles. This division of labor is not chaos, it is community. Each role supports the whole. Religion too shapes daily life, though not with the grand temples of Mesopotamia. Instead, spirituality seeps into the household and the small shrine. In niches, clay figurines of women with wide hips, fertility symbols perhaps, stand beside little bulls or other animals. Seals bearing mysterious symbols may represent gods, ancestors, or protective spirits. Rituals seem intimate, woven into domestic life. You can picture families pouring libations of milk, offering grain or lighting lamps at dusk, whispering prayers for fertility, protection or health. Children grow up in this ordered world, their lives filled with play and work. Clay toy carts, whistles shaped like birds, and animal figurines show their games. But from a young age they also learn skills, girls helping with grinding or weaving, boys assisting in fields or workshops. Education is not schools but apprenticeship, knowledge passed from hand to hand. The clothing of daily life is simple but practical. Men wear short cotton skirts or loincloths, sometimes cloaks draped over the shoulder. Women wear long skirts, their torsos wrapped in cloth, adorned with jewelry, beads, bangles, earrings. Hair is tied neatly. Terracotta figurines show elaborate buns or braids. The effect is graceful without excess. In the heat, light cotton breathes. In the cooler months, wool from sheep or goats adds warmth. Jewelry, however, is everywhere. Shell bangles clink on wrists, copper rings gleam, carnelian beads glow orange in the sun. Even modest households seem to own ornaments, perhaps inexpensive faience imitations, if not precious stones. Adornment is not luxury, it is identity, woven into gender, status, and community. You notice division of labor across gender lines, though not rigidly. Men dominate plowing, herding, and long-distance trade. Women grind grain, cook, care for children, weave and make pottery. But both men and women craft beads, tend animals, and participate in rituals. Children herd goats or fetch water. Elders tell stories or oversee tasks. Life is communal, every age and gender bound into the daily machine of survival. Social organization stretches beyond the household. The neighborhood functions as a unit, families cooperating to maintain drains, share wells, and organize work. Larger cities may have councils or assemblies, though evidence is scarce. What is clear is that governance is collective, not autocratic. No palaces rise here, no kings stamp their names on monuments. Authority whispers in shared granaries, standardized weights, orderly streets. It is a society where rules are written in brick and measure, not in royal decrees. Evening descends, and the city changes. Courtyards glow with lamps, shadows stretch across alleys. Families eat their final meals, voices softening. On rooftops, neighbors gather to talk, laugh and sing. Somewhere, a woman hums while spinning cotton. Somewhere else, a child falls asleep clutching a clay toy. Dogs bark in the distance, oxen low from their pens. Life here is not glamorous, not monumental, but deeply human. Rhythms of labor, food, ritual, and rest. And beneath it all is a quiet sense of order. Streets run straight, drains flow clean, households hum with routine. There is no palace towering above, no god demanding pyramids, no warlord barking commands. Instead, the Indus people build a society where daily life itself is the monument, orderly, resilient, communal. You feel it in every brick, every bead, every loaf of bread. Civilization here is not about kings or conquests. It is about people, organized together, making life livable. The streets of the Indus Valley by morning are always alive with trade, work, and chatter. But if you listen carefully, you'll notice something quieter threading through daily life. Not the clang of metal workers or the bleating of goats, but the low hum of ritual, an invisible rhythm that gives meaning to all that labor. In this civilization, religion is not carved into towering ziggurats or written in long hymns, but whispered in clay figurines, etched into seals, and practiced in courtyards and baths. To understand the Indus Valley, you must learn to see its spirituality in the smallest gestures. Start with the seals. Thousands have been uncovered, tiny squares of steatite, polished smooth, engraved with animals and symbols. The unicorn, mysterious and one-horned, perhaps mythical, appears often. So does the humped bull, fierce and muscular. Elephants, tigers, rhinoceroses, and buffalo parade across their surfaces, as if the entire natural world were enlisted into the spiritual imagination of these people. Above the animals, rows of script symbols remain undeciphered. Were these names of deities, invocations, trademark? Whatever their purpose, seals carry weight beyond economics. Many bear motifs of sacred power, suggesting they were touched, pressed, and revered as much as used. Step into a home, and you find clay figurines, small but potent, women with exaggerated hips and breasts, their jewelry etched in detail, their hair tied in buns. Fertility goddesses, scholars call them symbols of abundance, reproduction, and the life force of women and earth. Alongside them, you see bulls, rams, and terracotta animals, some with wheels that turn. Are they toys, offerings, or both? In the Indus Valley, play and prayer intertwine, and what children handle may also carry the weight of the sacred. Religion here is not about massive temples dominating skylines. Instead, it emerges in ritual spaces woven into the city fabric. At Mohenjo-Daro, the Great Bath is the most striking example. Picture it, a massive, rectangular pool, lined with baked brick, sealed with bitumen, accessible by steps on both sides. Surrounding rooms suggest places to change or perform rituals. Imagine priests or community leaders leading groups into the bath, pouring jars of water over bodies, immersing themselves in silence. Water, in this parched and flood-prone land, is both blessing and threat. To bathe ritually is to align oneself with purity, fertility, and cosmic balance. You dip your hand into the cool water, and the surface shivers like a mirror of belief. Fire too plays a role. At Kalibangan, archaeologists discovered rows of fire altars, carefully built of brick, arranged in patterns. Ashes, bones, and charred remains hint at sacrifices, perhaps of grain, animals, or ghee. Here, fire is not just for cooking or warmth, but for connecting to divine powers. Flames rise into the sky, carrying offerings upward, linking earth and heaven in brief, flickering bridges. Death reveals its own rituals. Walk to a cemetery outside Harappa and you see bodies buried in rows, aligned with care. Some graves contain pottery, ornaments, or beads, suggesting belief in an afterlife, or at least a sense of continuity beyond death. Bodies are often laid on their backs, heads to the north, as if pointing towards something sacred. Red ochre sometimes dusts the remains, echoing older prehistoric traditions of coloring the dead, perhaps to symbolize rebirth or protection. The silence of these graves speaks of reverence, continuity, and hope against the darkness of death. Yet religion is not confined to formal rites. It seeps into daily life. When a woman grinds grain, she may place a small figurine nearby for blessing. When a man leads cattle to the fields, he may whisper a prayer to the bull god for strength. When floods rise, families may offer milk or grain to appease river spirits. These rituals are small, ordinary, woven into work and survival. You realize spirituality here is not separate from life. It is life, layered invisibly over every task. Symbols multiply. The pipal tree, sacred even today in South Asia, appears in carvings, sometimes sheltering figures in meditative poses. Bulls are everywhere, their power and fertility linked to prosperity. A striking seal shows a horned figure seated cross-legged, surrounded by animals. Proto-Shiva, some suggest Lord of Beasts. Whether or not it is Shiva, it reveals a belief in powers that straddle human and animal, earth and divine. Festivals likely punctuated the year. Imagine the city alive with color, women wearing extra bangles, men driving decorated carts, children playing games in the streets, grain poured out in offerings, drums beating, fires burning, lamps flickering on rooftops. After harvest, the community may have gathered in celebration, thanking gods and spirits for survival through another season. At night, you picture strings of lamps glowing across the grid of streets, turning Mosho Daro into a galaxy of fire. What is remarkable is the absence of domination. No single temple towers, no king's name is carved into altars. Instead, belief seems communal, decentralized, embedded in homes, baths, altars, and objects. Power here is not in kings who mediate gods, but in communities who share ritual together. It is a spirituality of cooperation, not conquest. Yet it carries mystery. The script carved on seals remains unreadable. Were they prayers, chants, hymns, or mere trade labels? Without their voice, we must reconstruct religion from fragments, baths, figurines, seals, burials, altars. It is like listening to a song with half the notes missing, yet still the melody emerges. Fertility, purity, water, fire, animals, ancestors, these were the sacred themes of the Indus Valley. As evening falls, you sit on a rooftop, watching the city prepare for ritual. Families light lamps, flames flickering in doorways. A group gathers at a well, pouring water into jars and perhaps whispering prayers. Somewhere, a fire altar glows, smoke curling upward. The great bath reflects the stars above, water shimmering in moonlight. The city, so practical and ordered by day, now hums with unseen forces, a quiet faith binding its people together. And as you drift toward sleep, you realize this: in the Indus Valley, religion is not thunderous or monumental. It is subtle, intimate, woven into drains, baths, beads, and bread. It is not about kings or conquest, but about fertility, purity, and balance. A spirituality lived daily, whispered through clay and fire, shaping lives without ever needing to shout. The streets of Harappa are quiet in the morning haze, but if you follow the sound of chisels, the spin of potters' wheels, and the laughter of children playing with clay toys, you find yourself at the heart of something more than utility. Beyond food, beyond trade, beyond drains and wells, there is a deeper pulse here, the urge to create, The Indus Valley people may not have left behind pyramids or colossal statues, but they filled their world with art, subtle, intimate, practical, and profoundly human. To understand their civilization, you must look closely at the objects they touched, decorated, and left behind, for in them lies the story of how these people saw themselves and their world. Begin with the pottery, the most widespread canvas of the Indus imagination. In every household, jars and bowls bear designs painted in black on red or buff clay, geometric patterns, intersecting circles, chevrons, diamonds, and stylized plants. Sometimes animals appear, fish swimming in rhythmic curves, bulls with exaggerated horns, birds perched with delicate precision. These are not idle doodles but motifs repeated across hundreds of kilometers, suggesting shared symbols, shared meanings. Imagine women cooking lentil stew in a pot painted with fish. Was it decoration, or did the fish symbolize fertility, abundance, or good fortune? Every meal was framed in art, even if its meaning is lost to us. Now step into a bead workshop, and you witness art, transformed into luxury. Carnelian beads, heated to deepen their color, polished to glowing perfection, drilled with microscopic precision, strung into necklaces that gleam like drops of fire. Some beads are etched with white designs, circles, lines, chevrons, patterns, so fine you can barely see them without squinting. These etched carnelian beads were prized in Mesopotamia, where Sumerian queens wore them in burial. In your hand you hold an object that traveled thousands of kilometers, not because it was useful, but because it was beautiful. Jewelry fills the Indus world. Women wear bangles of shell, copper, silver, and faience, stacked up their arms, clinking with every gesture. Men wear necklaces, pendants, and amulets. Children wear beads, strung around their waists or necks. Rich families adorn themselves with gold and semi-precious stones, lapis, turquoise, agate. Poorer families wear faience, imitations, glowing blue-green like turquoise or terracotta bangles. In this civilization, adornment is universal. To be human is to decorate yourself. But art isn't confined to adornment, it spills into toys and figurines. Terracotta bulls with wheels roll along the street as children laugh. Tiny carts with moving axles clatter over the dust. Whistles shaped like birds chirp when blown. Clay figurines of women, animals, and even grotesque masks appear in homes. Some are clearly toys, others may be ritual objects. You hold a clay bull in your palm, its horns exaggerated, its hump towering, and wonder, was this a child's plaything, or a household charm of strength? Perhaps both. In the Indus Valley, art blurs the line between play, ritual, and daily life. Step into a craftsman's quarter, and you find faience makers at work. They crush quartz, glaze it with copper compounds, fire it until it gleams brilliant blue. Beads, amulets, tiles, objects that sparkle in the sun. Faience is the Bronze Age's answer to magic. Humble sand transformed into jewels by fire and skill. To wear faience is to carry the sparkle of innovation on your skin. Now run your hand along the seals, perhaps the most iconic art of the Indus. Small squares, engraved with animals and script, polished smooth. The unicorn dominates, its long horn curling forward, mysterious and graceful. Bulls, tigers, elephants, rhinoceroses, and composite beasts follow. Each seal is a masterpiece of miniature carving, its lines precise, its motifs powerful, pressed into clay. These seals marked ownership, trade, or ritual, yet they are more than economic tools. They are windows into a symbolic world where animals carry spiritual power. Hold a seal to the light and you feel the hum of belief encoded in art. Architecture itself holds artistic expression. Houses, though practical, include niches for lamps or decoration. The Great Bath, with its symmetry and scale, is not just functional, but aesthetic, its proportions pleasing, its steps inviting. At Dalavira, inscriptions and monumental gateways suggest a flair for dramatic presentation, even if modest compared to Mesopotamian or Egyptian monuments. Here, art lives not in statues of kings, but in careful design of spaces for communities. Consider also the body as canvas. Figurines show women with elaborate hairstyles, buns wound high, braids coiled tight, ornaments woven into hair. Men wear headbands, cloaks with patterned borders, perhaps dyed fabrics. Some figurines hint at tattoos or body paint. Imagine festival days when bodies became walking artworks, faces painted, arms jangling with bangles, garments bright with indigo or madder dye. The city itself must have shimmered like a living gallery during celebrations. Music and performance likely played a role, though evidence is faint. Terracotta rattles, whistles and drums suggest soundscapes. Dancers may have performed in courtyards, anklets jingling, arms adorned with bangles. Storytelling, song and ritual performance would have animated evenings. Art here is not silent, it is kinetic, auditory, embodied. And then there is the script, undeciphered but undeniably artistic. Rows of symbols carved into seals or painted on pottery carry a rhythm of form. Short, compact, geometric yet graceful. Even if we cannot read them, their visual power is striking. Imagine merchants pressing seals into clay, the script shining like a signature of culture. In those strokes, language and art merge. What strikes you most is that Indus art is intimate, portable, woven into life. No colossal statues, no towering reliefs, no murals of conquest. Instead, beads, bangles, seals, toys, figurines, objects you can hold in your hand, wear on your wrist, place on your hearth. Art here is democratic, shared across rich and poor, child and adult. A child's toy bull and a queen's carnelian necklace both reveal the same impulse to create, to decorate, to express. As the day ends, you sit in a courtyard. Children roll clay carts, women polish bangles, men carve seals. The air hums with creativity. Above, the sunset turns the city red, painting its brick walls in hues of fire, and you realize the Indus Valley's greatest monument is not a pyramid or a statue, but the collective artistry of daily life. Their art was not made to overwhelm or immortalize rulers, but to adorn existence, to infuse beauty into survival. And as you drift to sleep, you can still feel the beads slipping through your fingers, the cool glaze of faience against your skin, the painted lines of pottery under your gaze. This is the Indus legacy of art, quiet, human, enduring. You wander through the narrow lanes of Mohenjo-daro. On a quiet morning, a merchant lifts a tiny square object from a pouch and presses it into a lump of wet clay used to seal a jar. When he pulls it back, you see the impression, a bull with curved horns, and above it, a row of strange markings, lines, loops, rectangles, symbols unlike anything you've ever read. This is the Indus script, the voice of a civilization, preserved in thousands of fragments yet still mute to us today. To step into section 11 is to step into the silence of writing that refuses to yield its secrets. The script appears most often on seals, carved onto small pieces of steatite, polished to a soft sheen. Each seal fits comfortably in the palm of your hand. Some depict animals, the famous unicorn, bulls, tigers, elephants, while others show composite creatures or ritual scenes. Above the animal, always, a line of script. The characters are compact, arranged horizontal, each sign carved with meticulous precision. Unlike the sprawling hieroglyphs of Egypt or the cuneiform wedges of Mesopotamia, the Indus script is short, clipped, economical. Most inscriptions are only 4 to 6 signs long, the longest stretching to about 26. Archaeologists have uncovered more than 4,000 artifacts bearing these signs: seals, pottery shards, copper tablets, tools, jewelry. The symbols also appear scratched into walls and ivory rods. The consistency suggests a true writing system, not random doodles, yet it remains undeciphered. Without a bilingual key like the Rosetta Stone for Egyptian hieroglyphs, we stare at these marks like guests at a banquet where everyone else speaks a language we cannot grasp. What might it say? Perhaps the seal the merchant pressed marks ownership. This jar belongs to Kaba, son of Tiru. Perhaps it is a title, grain trader. Perhaps it names a god or a place or a clan. Without knowing, we can only guess. Some scholars argue the script represents Dravidian languages, ancestors of those still spoken in South India. Others propose a lost branch of Indo-European. Some even suggest it is not language at all but a system of symbols representing trade or ritual. The debate rages, yet the script sits stubbornly silent, like a locked door. Pause to look closely at the signs. There is a fish symbol, elegant and simple. In Dravidian, the word for fish, min, also means star. Was this a pun? A symbol for both food and sky? Another sign looks like a jar, another like a man with arms raised, another like a double circle. Some scholars think these are ideograms, pictures standing for concepts. Others believe they are phonetic, each sign a syllable. Without decipherment, the Indus people remain anonymous. No royal names, no poems, no laws, just whispers, carved into stone. But even in silence, the script tells us something. It tells us the Indus people valued record keeping. Seals were pressed into clay to seal jars, sacks and bundles, ensuring goods could be identified and trusted. A merchant sending cotton cloth to Mesopotamia could mark his cargo with a seal so that the buyer knew its origin. In this sense, the script functioned like a signature, an assurance of authenticity in trade, commerce, religion, and writing were intertwined. The aesthetic of the script is also striking. Signs are arranged with balance, carved with precision, sometimes framed within boxes. The seals are art as much as text. Hold one in your palm and you feel its weight, its smoothness, its order. Even if you cannot read it, you sense its authority. The script carried not just meaning but prestige. To press a seal into clay was to leave behind a mark of power, ownership, identity. Beyond seals, the script appears on pottery, short marks painted before firing, perhaps indicating ownership or contents. It appears on small copper plates, scratched with care, on ivory rods. The signs stretch in neat rows. On a massive signboard at Daulavira, symbols once glared down from a gateway, visible from afar. Imagine entering the city and seeing script blazing above the gate, announcing something vital. Welcome Granary, Assembly Hall, or perhaps the name of the settlement itself. That signboard is one of the earliest examples of large-scale writing in human history, rivaling anything in Mesopotamia or Egypt. And yet, unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, there are no long texts, no epic poems, no chronicles of kings. Indus writing is always brief. Perhaps it was used mainly for economic transactions and rituals, not for literature. Perhaps longer texts were written on perishable materials, palm leaves, cloth, bark, that vanished long ago. It leaves us aching for voices that never reached us. Imagine if somewhere in a Harappan library there once existed songs, myths, genealogies and laws now lost to the earth. The mystery is both frustrating and enchanting. Why did such illiterate people leave no decipherable trace? Was their script too context-dependent, too bound to symbols for us to pass now? Or are we simply too far removed, with no Rosetta Stone to bridge the gulf? Every attempt at decipherment sparks excitement, then doubt. To this day, scholars remain divided. Yet think of it differently. The undeciphered script keeps the Indus alive in a special way. Egypt's pharaohs shout their names from pyramids. Mesopotamian kings list their victories in clay, but the Indus people whisper. Their words survive only as enigmatic marks, teasing us, refusing to reveal themselves. This silence is its own kind of power. Walk again through the marketplace. Seals hang from merchants' necks on cords, pressed into clay lumps sealing jars of sesame oil. Children play with broken fragments of pottery scratched with signs. In a shrine, a priest presses a seal into wet clay as part of a ritual. Writing here is everywhere, woven into trade, play and worship. It is not monumental, not loud. It is practical, symbolic, democratic. As night falls, you sit with a seal in your palm. The unicorn looks back at you, its single horn curving gracefully, its eye calm. Above it, 5 signs, unreadable, silent, eternal. You close your eyes and imagine what they might say. Perhaps a merchant's name, perhaps a prayer, perhaps a word for hope. The truth is lost, yet the mystery endures. And as you drift towards sleep, the silence of the Indus script becomes almost soothing. The undeciphered words hum like a lullaby in your mind, an ancient whisper that will never quite resolve. The Indus people wrote, but they wrote for themselves, not for us. And maybe that is the secret. Their civilization's voice is not in words but in bricks, drains, beads, and seals. The writing remains locked, but the life it represents still breathes through every artifact you've touched tonight. You wander once again through the silent ruins of Mohenjo-Daro. The sun beats down on baked brick streets that run straight and true, drains still visible beneath your feet, wells punctuating nearly every lane. Everywhere order, everywhere standardization, and everywhere the sense of a guiding hand. Yet what you do not see is just as important as what you do. No towering statues, no royal palaces, no reliefs proclaiming the glory of kings, no lists of conquests carved into stone. The Indus Valley civilization seems to have flourished without a face of power. No pharaoh, no Gilgamesh, no Hammurabi, just a society whose political structure remains as mysterious as its undeciphered script. How then did it govern itself? Tonight you slip into the fabric of their political life, not by finding a single throne, but by tracing the evidence of collective organization, shared standards, and a style of governance so unusual in the ancient world that it forces you to rethink what politics even means. Start with the scale. At its height, The Indus Valley civilization stretched across nearly 1 million square kilometers, encompassing modern-day Pakistan, northwest India, and parts of Afghanistan. Cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro housed tens of thousands of people. Dozens of smaller towns and villages dotted the landscape, all bound together by trade, shared culture, and common practices. To keep such a sprawling civilization functioning required some form of governance. But here's the puzzle: no evidence of monarchs, dynasties, or royal courts has been uncovered. Unlike Mesopotamia, where kings plastered their names across every wall, the Indus is silent. Instead, the governance seems to have been collective. Power was not concentrated in one figure but distributed across councils, assemblies, or local leaders. Perhaps each city had elders who met to decide policies. Perhaps guilds of craftsmen and merchants wielded authority. Perhaps priests or ritual leaders played roles. Whatever the structure, it was a system that valued anonymity and function over personal glory. Imagine sitting in a meeting on the citadel mound of Harappa. A group of respected elders, merchants, and priests gather in a large hall. Before them are clay tablets marked with seals and weights. Discussions ripple through the group: how to store surplus grain, how to prepare for the monsoon, how to distribute water from wells. Decisions are made not by decree of a king, but by consensus, negotiation, and tradition. The faces change over time, but the system persists. One of the strongest clues to governance lies in standardization. Bricks used across the civilization follow a uniform ratio of 1:4. Weights are consistent, whether found in Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, or Lothal. Seals reflect common symbols. Even city layouts echo one another: gridded streets, drainage systems, wells, and citadels. This suggests not just cultural similarity but deliberate coordination. Some body, whether a central authority or a network of councils, ensured uniform practices across distant regions. Think of the implications. A trader could leave Mohenjo-Daro with a bag of carnelian beads, travel hundreds of kilometers north to Harappa, and weigh his goods on scales that matched exactly. A mason in Dalavera could fire bricks to the same proportions as one in Kalibangan. This was a civilization knit together by rules and standards, enforced without armies or inscriptions of law. Instead, compliance seems to have been cultural, ingrained, and collective. In many cities, the citadel mound dominates the landscape. Raised above the floodplain, it houses public buildings, granaries, baths, assembly halls, storage facilities. These are not palaces, they are civic. They suggest administration focused on food distribution, water management, and communal rituals. Governance was not about glorifying rulers, but about ensuring survival and prosperity. Picture the citadel of Mohenjo-Daro at dawn. Officials, perhaps elders, priests, or administrators, walk along brick platforms, inspecting granaries where grain is stored. Workers tally baskets of wheat and barley weighed on standardized stones. In another corner, scribes press seals into clay tokens, marking goods for redistribution. On the Great Bath, attendants prepare for ritual use, sweeping stairs and filling the pool with fresh water. The citadel hums not with royal command but with administrative efficiency. Another possibility is that governance flowed through guilds of merchants and craftsmen. Trade was the lifeblood of the civilization, and those who controlled it may have held influence. Merchants traveling to Mesopotamia, Oman, or Central Asia brought wealth and prestige. At home, guilds may have regulated weights, oversaw apprenticeships, and managed trade routes. A merchant guild could easily have formed a powerful council, shaping policy through economic strength rather than military might. Imagine a council chamber, where beadmakers, potters, and traders sit alongside farmers and elders. Each guild sends representatives. Disputes over trade routes, grain prices, or craft standards are settled here. Rules are not carved in stone but enforced through custom, cooperation, and the weight of collective agreement. Religion may also have played a role. Figurines, seals, and fire altars suggest ritual was woven into governance. Priests or ritual specialists could have overseen ceremonies, sanctified decisions, and maintained social order through belief. The Great Bath hints at ritual purification tied to authority. Those who manage sacred spaces may also have managed civic ones, blending religion and politics. Yet, unlike Mesopotamia or Egypt, no grand temples dominate the Indus. If priests ruled, they ruled quietly, their power woven into daily life rather than proclaimed from monuments. Governance was spiritual as much as practical, guiding not by fear of kings, but by shared ritual. Perhaps the most startling absence in the Indus is evidence of militarism. Few weapons have been found, and fortifications appear minimal compared to Mesopotamia's city walls. Skulls show little sign of violent death. This suggests a society that governed without constant warfare. Disputes may have been settled through trade negotiations, ritual mediation, or local assemblies. Imagine the difference. In Mesopotamia, kings boasted of conquests and crushed rivals. In the Indus, a dispute over water rights between two villages might be resolved by elders meeting at a neutral site, offering gifts, performing rituals, and sealing agreements with standardized seals. Governance relied on cooperation, not conquest. All of this points to a decentralized but unified system. Each city managed its own affairs but adhered to shared standards of bricks, weights, seals, and governance. There may have been regional councils, alliances between cities, or periodic gatherings of leaders. Power was not top-down but distributed horizontally, across communities and professions. This model is radical compared to other Bronze Age civilizations, where others centralized power in monarchs. The Indus dispersed it. Where others glorified rulers with monuments, the Indus glorified order itself, with drains, wells, and brick ratios. When the civilization declined around 1900 BCE, its governance likely weakened. Standardization faltered, bricks shifted, ratios, weights varied. Without strong councils or collective systems, localism may have grown. Villages replaced cities, rituals fragmented, trade shrank. The decline of governance mirrored the decline of urban life. Yet for centuries, this system held firm, proof that centralized monarchy is not the only way to rule. To bring it alive, picture this. You stand on the citadel mound of Harappa during a council gathering. Elders sit cross-legged on mats, merchants lay out ledgers marked with seals, priests light a small fire in the corner, a farmer brings a complaint. His fields were flooded when a canal overflowed. The council debates, weighing fairness against need. They agree to organize labor to repair the canal, drawing workers from several neighborhoods. Each guild contributes resources. A scribe presses a seal into clay to record the decision. No king presides. No decree is shouted. The decision is collective, the action communal. The city hums back into rhythm. What does this tell us about political life? That the Indus Valley civilization may have been one of humanity's earliest experiments in collective governance. A system where no king's name survives, but where civic order thrived. A system where the power lay not in thrones but in bricks, drains, wells, and standards. In many ways it feels modern, more like a republic or federation than a monarchy. As night falls, you walk through the quiet city. Oil lamps flicker in windows. Families gather in courtyards. Drains gurgle softly beneath the streets. The system of governance is invisible yet everywhere, woven into the bricks, the water, the grain, the trade. It is not about one person ruling many, but about many ruling themselves together. And as you drift towards sleep, you realize the genius of the Indus Valley civilization was not in conquering others, but in governing themselves, quietly, collectively, and with a vision that kept their world running for centuries without a single king's boast carved into stone. The city wakes again, and you notice something subtle. Precision is everywhere. Bricks all follow the same ratio. Weights balance perfectly from one city to the next. Streets intersect in exact right angles. Wells are placed with geometric regularity. This is not coincidence. It is knowledge, encoded into everyday life. The Indus Valley people may not have left us written treatises or monumental observatories, but their science and measurement systems hum quietly in every artifact they left behind. Tonight you walk through their knowledge, piece by piece, and see how they tamed the chaos of rivers, floods, and trade with reason and order. Start with the bricks beneath your feet. The ratio 1:4 appears everywhere. Length, width, height. Whether in Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, or Dholavira, the same proportions hold. This uniformity suggests a deep understanding of geometry and standardization. Imagine masons using measuring cords or wooden molds, ensuring every brick fits perfectly with the next. This isn't random building, it's a deliberate application of mathematical proportion. The very cities are textbooks in geometry, silently teaching you ratios as you walk their streets. Step into a marketplace, and the power of measurement becomes obvious. Merchants pile wheat into baskets, weigh beads on balances, and measure out sesame oil. The weights are tiny stones, polished and precise, shaped into cubes, cylinders, and discs. Across the entire civilization, These weights are standardized in a binary system, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16 and so on. A weight from Harappa balances exactly with one from Lothal, hundreds of kilometers away. This consistency suggests a governing body, or cultural agreement enforcing standards. It also shows an understanding of mathematical progression and division. You pick up a 1-unit cube, then a 2-unit, then a 4-unit. They double with elegant logic. This binary precision foreshadows later systems in science, commerce, even computing. Here in 2600 BCE, the Indus people are already thinking in ratios, increments and balances.
Look at the wells. Nearly every house has one, lined with carefully placed bricks, sunk deep into the ground. The engineering is practical but brilliant. Circular walls distribute pressure evenly, keeping the well intact for centuries. At Dolavera, reservoirs and dams capture seasonal rains, channeling water into massive storage systems. Channels cut into bedrock guide the flow with precision. This is hydrology in practice, knowledge of water, gravity and flow, applied to survival. Drainage systems show the same sophistication. Covered drains slope gently to carry wastewater away. Access points allow cleaning. Intersections are planned. This is not improvisation, it is engineering based on observation, measurement, and foresight. Even modern cities struggled with sanitation until the 19th century. The Indus had solved it 4,000 years earlier. Though direct evidence is scarce, hints of astronomical awareness emerge. Seals depicting stars and the fish symbol may reference constellations. The need to track monsoon suggests calendars based on lunar or solar cycles. Farmers planting wheat and barley relied on precise timing, likely guided by observation of the skies. Some structures at Dolavera align with cardinal directions, suggesting knowledge of astronomy and geometry. Standing on a citadel, you watch the stars rise over the horizon, imagining priests or elders marking their positions, predicting rains, guiding agricultural rhythms. Clay figurines and terracotta models hint at medical knowledge. Some show human forms with detailed features, possibly used in teaching or healing rituals. The careful planning of sanitation itself reflects an understanding of health. Drains, wells and bathing areas reduce disease. Amulets and charms suggest a blend of spiritual and practical medicine. While Mesopotamian texts speak of surgery, the Indus offers subtler evidence, a civilization attentive to cleanliness, balance and protective ritual. Everywhere you look, math underpins daily life. Brick ratios, weights and city grids all reflect mathematical reasoning. Measuring cords may have been used to lay out streets and courtyards. Circular wells and rectangular reservoirs show geometry in stone. Farmers gauged fields, calculated seed amounts and measured harvests. Merchants tracked trade values using standardized weights. Consider the seal inscriptions. Though undeciphered, their arrangement shows pattern and repetition, suggesting numerical or linguistic order. Some scholars even argue that certain signs may represent numbers. Whether or not that's true, the evidence is clear. The Indus people applied mathematical logic to society in systematic ways. Look again at the bead makers. Drilling holes into carnelian requires incredible precision. Using stone drills tipped with copper, they achieved bores less than a millimeter wide, perfectly centered. This is not crude work, but a mastery of mechanics, pressure, and material. Metallurgy shows similar skill, smelting copper, alloying with tin, casting tools and ornaments. Artisans experimented with faience, controlling chemical reactions to produce glazed colors. Every craft was a laboratory, every workshop a classroom of practical science. Even though undeciphered, the script itself represents a form of information technology, compact, repeatable symbols carved onto durable seals. This is knowledge stored, transmitted, and verified. Combined with standardized weights and measures, the script ensured trade functioned with trust. Though we cannot read their records, the very existence of thousands of inscribed objects shows a society committed to systematizing knowledge. Imagine yourself as an Indus official tasked with overseeing markets. You carry a small set of polished weights in a pouch. Merchants bring grain, beads, and cloth. Each transaction is checked against your weights. A trader from Lothal presents sesame oil in jars, sealed with a unicorn seal. You press your own seal to verify it, check its weight and record the exchange. Later you walk to the granary, where laborers stack sacks of wheat. You measure each load, ensuring fairness. This is governance through science. Order maintained not by kings but by standards, measures and verification. Though the Indus script hides their words, their knowledge shines in material remains. They understood geometry, ratios,
hydrology, sanitation, metallurgy, and trade systems with remarkable sophistication. Their science was practical, applied to survival and community. No texts proclaim their discoveries, but their cities themselves are monuments of knowledge. As night falls, you sit by a well, its circular wall cool under your hand. Stars prick the sky above, the moon rising over the horizon. Perhaps a priest once stood where you sit, marking constellations, predicting the monsoon. Perhaps a merchant once weighed beads here, balancing scales under the same moonlight. The Indus Valley civilization may not speak to us in deciphered words, but its language of measurement and order is everywhere, in bricks, drains, wells, beads and weights. And as you drift into sleep, the rhythm of numbers lulls you. 1, 2, 4, 8. Ratios, measures, balances, the quiet mathematics of a civilization that built order from rivers and chaos, and left behind a legacy of precision still echoing 4,000 years later. The streets of Mohenjo-Daro are quieter than they used to be. You walk along the grid of bricks, past wells that once gushed with fresh water, past drains that once ran clean, past granaries that once bulged with wheat and barley, but now the drains are clogged, the wells silting up, and the granaries half empty. A hush clings to the air, not the hum of prosperity but the stillness of decline. The Indus Valley civilization, once vibrant with bustling trade and humming workshops, begins to falter. Tonight you follow the arc of its challenges and decline, a slow unraveling of a world that thrived for centuries without kings, only to meet its end in silence. Start with the land itself. The Indus Valley depended on the rivers and monsoons, and both began to change around 2000 BCE. Geological evidence shows shifts in the courses of rivers. The once mighty Saraswati Gagahakra began to dry, its flow weakening until villages along its banks were abandoned. At the same time, the Indus itself shifted course, flooding some areas while leaving others parched. Imagine living in a city where your lifeline of water suddenly wandered away, leaving fields dry and canals empty. The monsoons, too, betrayed their rhythm. For centuries, rains had come with steady regularity, feeding crops. Then, around 2100–1900 BCE, the monsoons weakened, droughts stretched longer, harvests shrank, and famine stalked the land. In some years, floods still ravaged cities, drowning fields. The climate turned fickle, oscillating between drought and deluge. Farmers who once relied on predictable cycles faced ruin. Grain surpluses dwindled, granaries emptied, and cities that depended on the countryside's abundance began to starve. The very success of the Indus cities became a burden. Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, Dholavira, and others grew large, their populations dense. To sustain them required constant inflows of grain, water, and resources. As environmental stress mounted, the cities became vulnerable. Wells dried, drains overflowed, refuse piled up in streets once immaculate. Archaeologists note evidence of neglected sanitation in the later phases, drains left uncleared, bricks reused haphazardly, structures repaired with less care, the system of order frayed. You walk through neighborhoods once pristine, now crowded, messy, struggling to cope. Commerce, once the lifeblood of the Indus, also faltered. Trade routes, westward to Mesopotamia, weakened, as Mesopotamia itself faced upheavals around 2000 BC. The demand for carnelian beads, cotton cloth and sesame oil waned. Ships leaving Lothal's dockyard grew fewer. Merchants, once wealthy and influential, lost power. Without trade, the cities lost not only wealth, but also the glue that bound distant settlements together. A civilization built on exchange felt the sting of isolation. One of the clearest signs of decline is the loss of standardization. For centuries, bricks had followed the 1:4 ratio, but in the later phases, this consistency falters. Bricks shrink, proportions vary, quality declines. The same happens with weights. Once uniform across the civilization, now irregular. This breakdown of shared standards suggests a weakening of governance, a loss of collective order. What was once a federation of cities, tied by rules and cooperation, now frayed into localism. Each community began doing things its own way, signaling the collapse of unity. Inside the cities, social stresses mounted. As food grew scarce, inequality deepened. Wealthier families may have hoarded resources while poorer ones starved. Burials from the late phase show fewer ornaments, suggesting declining prosperity. Urban populations shrank as people abandoned cities for rural life. Imagine families packing their belongings, sealing their wells, and walking out of Mohenjo-Daro forever. seeking survival in villages where life was simpler and less dependent on failing urban systems. Crowded, declining cities became breeding grounds for disease, with drains left clogged and wells polluted. Waterborne illnesses spread. Children weakened by malnutrition succumbed more easily. Archaeologists have found skeletons with signs of stress and disease from these later phases. The hum of the city now carried the cough of sickness, the whisper of exhaustion. Interestingly, decline came not through conquest. There is little evidence of warfare or invasion in this period. Unlike Mesopotamia or Egypt, where cities were sacked and rebuilt under new kings, the Indus cities simply withered. Their fall was not the clash of swords, but the slow erosion of systems under environmental and social pressure. This makes their collapse haunting, not a dramatic destruction, but a quiet fading. Walk through late Harappa. The great granaries are abandoned. Houses are subdivided into smaller, cramped rooms, suggesting overcrowding or poverty. Kilns that once produced bricks for public buildings now churn out uneven, lower-quality materials. Seals become cruder, pottery less decorated. At Mohenjo-Daro, upper levels reveal haphazard revarding, drains left in disrepair. The order that once defined the cities is gone. And yet, life did not vanish instantly. People adapted. Smaller villages thrived where cities failed. Farmers shifted to crops that required less water. Like millet, communities moved eastward, toward the more reliable monsoons of the Ganges plain. The civilization didn't collapse overnight, it transformed, fragmenting into regional cultures that carried pieces of Indus traditions forward. Imagine living in Mohenjo-Daro around 1800 BCE. The streets are still busy, but less so. Workshops once filled with beadmakers now stand half empty. Merchants complain that caravans no longer come from Mesopotamia. Farmers bring smaller harvests. Grain prices rise. In the marketplace, weights are irregular, disputes more frequent. Wells taste brackish. Drains smell foul. At night, families whisper of leaving, following kin to smaller villages. The city still stands, but its soul is fading. By 1700 BCE, many great cities were abandoned. Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, Dholavira, names that once meant hubs of trade and governance, lay silent. Villages owned the land instead, their people still farming wheat, barley and cotton, still making beads and pottery, but without the scale or standardization of old. The Indus Valley civilization had not been destroyed, but had dissolved into smaller, scattered communities. What does this decline reveal? That even the most orderly systems can falter when environment shifts, when trade falters, when cooperation breaks. The Indus Valley civilization thrived, not because of kings or conquests, but because of shared rules, standards and networks. When those networks weakened, the civilization unraveled, and yet its legacy endured. Farming techniques, craft traditions, town planning, even cultural symbols flowed forward into later South Asian societies. As night falls on the abandoned streets of Mohenjo-Daro, you walk among the bricks. The silence is heavy, but not empty. For centuries, people laughed here, worked here, prayed here. Their civilization declined, but it did not vanish. Its spirit lingers in the fields, villages and cultures that followed. The decline was not an ending but a transformation, a shift from cities back to villages, from central order to local resilience. And as you drift toward sleep, the quiet of the ruined city wraps around you. The drains no longer gurgle, the wells no longer echo with buckets, but the memory of order still whispers from the bricks. The Indus Valley civilization did not die with a bang. It exhaled slowly, fading back into the land that gave it life. You walk now through a landscape changed. The great streets of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro are fading into memory. Granaries no longer hum with labor, and seals lie forgotten in abandoned houses. But life has not ended. Families still tend fields, still spin cotton, still shape clay into jars. The Indus Valley civilization did not vanish in one moment. It transformed, shifting into what historians call the late Harappan phase, from roughly 1900 to 1300 BCE. This period is not collapse but transition, a reweaving of society into new patterns, rural and regional, carrying echoes of the old into the future. Tonight you walk through that transformation, feeling the threads of continuity and change. First, the cities shrink. Harappa, once home to tens of thousands, dwindles as families leave for smaller settlements. Mohenjo-Daro empties, its wells silting, its drains clogged. At Dholavira, vast reservoirs stand dry, the city's grandeur fading, yet the countryside is alive. Villages spread across Punjab, Gujarat and the Ganges plain. People turn from urban order to rural resilience. Imagine a family once living near Mohenjo-daro now resettling in a small farming hamlet, their skills intact but their lives simpler, fewer drains, fewer granaries, but fields of millet and rice sustaining them. This is decentralization. The dense, standardized order of the mature Harappan phase gives way to local variation. Each village adapts to its environment, using whatever resources it can. The civilization does not vanish. It scatters like seeds on the wind, taking root in new soils. Agriculture, too, transforms. Wheat and barley remain staples, but farmers experiment more with millet and rice, crops better suited to changing climates and weaker monsoons. Rice cultivation expands in eastern regions, marking a profound agricultural shift. In drier areas, hardy millets sustain families. Cotton continues, woven into cloth, though trade declines. You walk through a field where millet stands short, but resilient, tended by farmers who have learned to adapt. Harvests are smaller but steady, enough for villages rather than cities. Craft production changes as well. The great workshops of Harappa no longer produce beads and seals on massive scales. Instead, artisans in villages make simpler ornaments, terracotta bangles, shell trinkets, stone beads drilled with less precision. Faience still gleams, but less frequently. Pottery styles shift, painted motifs grow cruder, less standardized, more regional. What once unified an entire civilization now fragments into local styles. In one village, pots bear simple geometric designs. In another they are plain. You feel the loss of central refinement, but also the gain of diversity. Seals, once everywhere, nearly disappear. The unicorn, the bull, the tiger, symbols of a unified symbolic world, fade from use. The script vanishes with them. Whatever purpose it served in trade, ritual or administration, it no longer functions in these smaller, fragmented societies. Literacy, at least in its Indus form, dies here. Without trade networks and standardized governance, writing loses meaning. You pick up a broken seal fragment from the dirt, a silent relic of a world that no longer needs its voice. From the ashes of unity rise distinct regional cultures. In Gujarat, the lustrous red ware pottery tradition emerges, shimmering with polished surfaces. In Punjab, cemetery H culture develops, with new burial practices and pottery styles. In the Ganges plain, small settlements grow that will later feed into Vedic traditions. Each region bends Indus heritage to its own needs, carrying fragments of the old while forging the new. Imagine traveling across the land. In one village, you see farmers sowing millet in dry soil. In another, women paint red pottery with simple designs. In yet another, families bury their dead in new styles, urns, cremation, or extended burials. The diversity is striking, a patchwork of cultures replacing the uniformity of the old. Yet amid the change, continuity endures. Families still grind wheat with stone querns. Women still wear bangles, now terracotta instead of shell or copper. Children still play with clay carts and animal figurines. Houses still have courtyards, even if drains are fewer. Fire altars remain in some places, rituals still whispered by priests or elders. The essence of Indus daily life, food, family, craft, ritual lives on, even as cities crumble. Long-distance trade declines sharply. The dockyard at Lothal falls silent, its basins silted. Merchants no longer sail to Mesopotamia, and Mesopotamian tablets cease to mention Meleha, yet local trade continues. Villages exchange grain for pottery, beads for cloth, salt for fish. Ox carts still creak along dusty paths, but their range is smaller, their cargo lighter. The grand networks shrink into regional circuits, sustaining life but not grandeur. Governance changes too. Without great cities there are no citadels, no assembly halls. Power shifts to local elders or chiefs, families who manage resources and settle disputes. Councils still exist, but smaller, tied to kinship and locality rather than civilization-wide standards. Inequality may have grown sharper, as some families controlled land and resources while others struggled. The collective order of the mature Harappan fades into localized authority. As the late Harappan period unfolds, new peoples move into the region. Indo-Aryan groups, migrating from Central Asia, begin to settle in the subcontinent. Evidence suggests cultural blending. Indus agricultural techniques, mixing with Indo-Aryan rituals. Indus pottery mixing with new styles. This blending lays the foundations for later Vedic culture. Though the Indus script vanishes, Indus traditions of farming, urban planning, and ritual echo in new languages and customs. Picture a day in 1500 BCE. You wake in a mud brick house, smaller than those of Mohenjo-Daro, but with the same courtyard at its heart. Women grind millet, their bangles clinking. Men lead cattle to fields. Children chase goats, laughing, carrying clay whistles shaped like birds. At the edge of the village, a small fire altar smokes. Priests, chanting softly as families offer grain. Pottery jars stand in neat rows, plain but sturdy. Life is humbler, quieter, but still recognizable as Indus at its core. In the evening, families gather under the stars. Stories are told of ancestors who once lived in great cities, where streets were straight and drains ran clean. Children listen wide-eyed, imagining worlds they will never see. The memory of the cities lingers, passed on through story, even as daily life continues in smaller ways. By 1300 BCE, the Indus Valley civilization, as historians define it, is gone. But its people remain, scattered across villages, their traditions absorbed into emerging cultures. This was not extinction, but transformation. The Indus became part of a larger South Asian story, its legacy woven into languages, rituals, farming, and memory. As night falls in your village, you sit by a hearth, the stars burn above, the fields whisper in the breeze, and the sounds of life grinding stones, cattle lowing, children laughing, carry on. The great cities may be abandoned, but the people endure. The Indus Valley civilization did not vanish into silence, it transformed into countless voices, scattered across the land, whispering still. And as you drift towards sleep, you realize the truth. Civilizations do not end, they change. The Indus Valley lives on, not in towering monuments or deciphered texts, but in the rhythms of South Asian life that trace back, quietly, to those ancient cities of brick and drain. You step into the present, carrying the dust of Harappa on your sandals and the silence of Mohenjo-Daro's drains in your ears. The Indus cities are long gone, their bricks scattered, their script undeciphered, their people transformed into new cultures and languages. And yet, if you look closely, the Indus Valley civilization is not dead, it lives on, quietly, stubbornly, in traditions, technologies and rhythms that echo through millennia of South Asian life. Tonight, you trace those echoes, from the bricks of abandoned citadels, to the villages and cities of today. Begin in the fields. Wheat, barley, and millet still sprout across South Asia, just as they did under the Indus sun. Rice, cultivated in the late Harappan phase, became a staple for billions. Cotton, first domesticated here, still clothes the world. The rhythms of sowing with monsoons, harvesting with the dry season, and storing grain in bins, these began with the Indus and never ceased. A farmer in Punjab today, bending to sow seeds under the monsoon sky, follows patterns shaped 4,000 years ago. Walk into a modern South Asian city and you still feel faint echoes of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. Wells and courtyards remain central to neighborhoods. Gridded layouts appear in old towns. The emphasis on water management, reservoirs, tanks, stepwells, derives from Indus ingenuity. The very idea that cities should be planned rather than haphazard may be their greatest gift. Even when cities grew chaotic in later centuries, the Indus had shown another possibility: urban life organized not for rulers, but for people. The obsession with water, bathing, purity, drainage runs deep. The Great Bath finds echoes in ritual bathing in rivers like the Ganges, in temple tanks, in stepwells. The Indus' concern with drains and cleanliness foreshadows later cultural emphases on ritual purity and hygiene. Each time a pilgrim immerses in a sacred river, you glimpse the ghost of Mohenjo-Daro's bath, water shimmering under the sun. Bangles, beads and ornaments remain beloved. Women in South Asia still stack bangles on their arms, just as Indus women did with shell and terracotta. Beads of carnelian and fanes continue to adorn necks and wrists. Painted pottery, with its geometric motifs, lingers in folk traditions. Figurines of mothers, bulls and deities echo the fertility symbols of Harappa. The Indus style of small, intimate art, portable, personal, woven into life, still shapes aesthetics today. Though undeciphered, Indus religion seems to echo in later Hindu traditions. The pipal tree, sacred in seals, remains revered. The bull, powerful and fertile, finds later expression in Nandi, Shiva's mount. A seal showing a horned, cross-legged figure surrounded by animals resembles later images of Shiva as Pashupati, lord of beasts. Ritual bathing, fire altars, and fertility goddesses find parallels in Vedic and Hindu practices. While direct continuity is debated, The resonances are striking, spiritual DNA runs deep. Perhaps the most radical legacy is political. The Indus showed that cities could flourish without monuments to rulers, without glorifying kings. Governance could be collective, anonymous, functional. This lesson still whispers in later traditions of panchayats, village councils that govern by consensus rather than decree. South Asian politics has often carried tension between centralized authority and local self-rule. The Indus leaned heavily toward the latter, a legacy of cooperation without kingship. Standardized weights and measures influenced later Indian systems. The precision of Harappan cubes foreshadows later mathematical sophistication in South Asia. Their binary weight progression, brick ratios, and geometric layouts left intellectual seeds that grew in later Vedic and classical traditions of mathematics, astronomy, and architecture. Though not written, memory of the Indus may survive in myth. Later Vedic texts speak of great rivers, vanished Saraswati, and ancient peoples. Stories of floods, migrations, and vanished cities may carry echoes of Harappan decline. The civilization itself is forgotten in name but remembered in whispers, myth folded over history. For centuries the Indus lay hidden. Villagers carted away bricks from Mohenjo-daro to build houses. Fields grew over Harappa. It wasn't until the 1920s that archaeologists uncovered these cities, revealing an ancient world rivaling Egypt and Mesopotamia. The rediscovery reshaped South Asian history, proving that urban civilization here was as old, as complex, and as innovative as any in the world. Today, Harappa and Mohenjo-daro stand as UNESCO World Heritage Sites, their bricks weathering but their significance enduring. What sets the Indus apart is its quietness. No boasting kings, no epic wars, no towering pyramids. Instead, a civilization that poured genius into drains, wells, beads, and bricks. Its legacy lies not in monuments to rulers, but in the daily dignity of ordinary people. Clean water, fair weights, adorned bodies, shared rituals. It is a reminder that civilization can be measured not in conquests, but in how people live together. Walk today through a South Asian village. Women grind grain in courtyards, bangles clinking. Farmers plow with oxen, sowing wheat in monsoon.